Hello, hello, camera. Good to see you. My conversation partner. Anyway, I just wanted to pick up on the subject that I was talking about last night. And that is the subject, the origin of suffering. What is the origin of suffering? Do you know, camera? You don't? I can tell you what the origin of suffering is. The origin of all suffering is when a child is not given primal trust. When primal trust is not established, then all these problems unfold later on in that person's life. All these different problems. And the primal trust, that's not only the first years of someone's life. That goes way back before. It goes all the way back to the day of the moment of conception. Okay? Not in the sense of pro-life shit. That's not what I'm talking about here. Okay? When somebody really makes that decision, I want a child, they have to really nurture that living being, okay, fully, to the fullest. They cannot drink or have stress or any of these things, or fight with somebody, you know, or have a fist fight or something. That's something probably what would happen to me. So, but I decided not to have kids, see, so I made that decision. Some people get a little bit aggressive during pregnancy, and then they go on somebody's throat. That has to do with hormones. And that also has to do with their own unempowerment, okay. So, someone has to really resolve these issues first, all of these issues, before they make that decision, I'm going to bring this child into this world, okay. And if they can't, if the circumstances are bad, and this is my opinion on it, then that child should not be brought into the life, into the world, you know. Even if it's already conceived, because it is better to terminate a wasp embryo, that's the same as a wasp embryo, you know, if it's just in a larva state like this, little larva state, 2 to 3 weeks old, you know. Well, then it's not a biggie, okay. But don't do that yourself, okay, at home. You have to go to a professional, of course. And don't shoot the professionals, because we need them, right? We need them to do this safely, so that neither this little thingy there, the little larvae is hurting too much, and so the little larvae doesn't just get bruised and then grow anyway, you know. Yeah, I know somebody who has experienced that, and that left extreme marks on her life. Okay. Extreme suffering, extreme problems of extreme need to protect herself and so on, and can't see anything else other than that. So don't do this to this new life, okay? Get over my haircut, okay? Forget about that. So let's just focus on the subject itself. Okay, we have too many people already. It is better to adopt a dog. Much, much better. There's so many dogs who want to be your child, you know, who want to be nurtured, just like a baby wants to be nurtured. The same way, there's no difference. And it's better for the environment too. And it is so much lovelier. So, and yeah, and they're pure-minded, you know, so, and they're not gonna give you shit later on. They're your most loyal follower. That's why I say dogs are gods. Only the gurus who don't put themselves above you are the real gurus. We have to keep that in mind. And all these things we have to take into consideration when we think about suffering in the world. All these things that are going on, all the misery that is put on living beings is ultimately going back to that very base factor, and that is the person has not received the true attention and love from the caregiver, from the mother or the father or any kind of protector that they had. Any person who was responsible for them, who had custody over their child. So we have to be really tuned in, and I think this is the hardest because most people haven't received it, and then they grow up to be not in tune, be disconnected from it, and then they do the same again to their offspring. We need to come to our senses. We need to stop in our tracks right now. We can't postpone this any longer. Stop in your tracks and realize what you're doing. There's a real good film made by Colleen Serrault. It's a French director and writer who wrote and directed the film The Green Planet or The Green Beautiful. It's a very beautiful film, and it brings us exactly to that subject. Okay, you have to give your absolute all, and then you're tuned in. And in that film, it is so easy, a woman from out of space comes here, and she can just snap us into tune with the universe in an instant. I wish it was that easy, but it definitely isn't that easy. This can't be happening overnight. This is way too complex. It's like what Esther Hicks said about the 22 levels of mindset. You have the highest where you're totally empowered and inspired and proliferating and in a flow, and the lowest where you're totally helpless. And most people are somewhere in between, but they're more. It's more happening at the lower levels on that scale of these 22 levels. So it's more on the level of, and most people seem to be on the level of denial and somewhat feeling miserable, but denying it and treading to the bottom and buckling to the top. And this is also feeding the perpetuation of hierarchy, and so this is something we need to get away from. We need to get away from hierarchy, we need to get away from shame, and we need to get away from humiliation. This is very important, and the humiliation has escalated lately on the internet. More and more people were humiliated. Can you imagine how our lives could be, how beautiful and abundant? And I can't even imagine it myself. I'm too much in my grief, in the horror, in the horror I see every day, and I'm too much in that dimension. It's very hard to get out of that dimension. I try to meditate on it, and I get glimpses here and there of that other dimension, and I have dreams sometimes about that other dimension. It is a completely different feeling. It's like as if the weight is lifted off you completely. Once that weight is lifted off you, you can't imagine how, it's like everything shifts. Your whole perception shifts of yourself and life, and for the first time you will see the leaves of a tree, how unbelievably beautiful it is, and how amazing a tree smells. The smell of Grand Fir Absolute oil. Oh my God. That is a glimpse of the other dimension. But when we're so immersed in our petty needs that are disconnected, like the petty needs of peer pressure, how to make oneself fit in so that we're being respected or adored, So then we don't see all of these things. We don't see the preciousness of the other dimension because we're too much immersed in the disconnected dimension. So we need to come out of this.